Where
like hey, how
so we're live now.
we are going. Yes, we have went live. So it's great. Thanks, Shraddha. Welcome. And actually, like in a couple of minutes, more people will come in and just join in. Shraddha, hi. Hello. It's great to see you.
Sorry, my internet is lagging a bit, so I'm
no worries.
Off.
Is this the first time you're joining us for the webinars?
No, I usually join. This is my third Wednesday. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome back then.
Lovely. Thank you.
It's like a thing now.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I think we can start, and thank you for being on time and early. Since we're live, Albert and I was just talking about humor in Singapore and Philippines. Yeah, like he said, like it's a very different humor here in Singapore. But I say like people in the Philippines tend to be more humorous. Like they have, yeah. Just in general, I grew up here. Anyway, so let me do an introduction for Albert. And since we're already live, welcome to our weekly webinar. Albert, I met via LinkedIn, and that he has quite an illustrious career from the Philippines all the way to Singapore. So he actually started his career as a web developer and designer in the Philippines, and worked his way up to become the lead designer of TradeHero, a Singapore-based Fintech startup. In 2016, he was one of the early employees of Circles.Life, and he has went on to help them build their design team. So today, I think it's a great honor that we have Albert to share with us some of his experiences as a hiring manager, how he broke into the industry, as well as how Circles.Life came to be so customer-centric. And I have to admit, I'm a Circles.Life customer myself. And therefore, I think it will be really interesting to hear what's going to go on. So, Albert, without further ado, I'd like to welcome you. Is there anything else I missed out on your bio?
Hi, thanks for having me, Daylon. No, you nailed it.
Awesome.
We will go into more detail, I guess, as we progress.
Okay.
But we'll see.
So let's start with Circles.Life. Then maybe we work backwards, right?
Sure.
So I think that's the more interesting piece. I noticed Circles.Life is very different from other telcos that I sign up and I subscribe for, right? So can you describe a little bit about the culture, to us, and how did Circles.Life become so customer centric?
Yeah. So when I joined in 2016, so like meeting directly with the founders for the job. Even then, I could already see that like they had a really good reason for creating this company. It started from their own frustrations as first as telco customers themselves, and as sort of experts in the field in Singapore, not having seen a lot of innovation in the industry for some time, and seeing how telco customers were treated in general, even way before I came to Singapore. So yeah, I saw that it came from like a really strong passion about customers being one themselves, and how can telco be better to its customers as an industry, not just one company in general, but as an industry, and how a business like telco can really make a difference in people's lives, since it's something that all of us use, whether we think about it or not. It's there. We think about it when it stops working, and then all our world shuts down. So yes, I think that's where in any company, right, like the cultural starts from the leadership. So uh,
I,
like
I think
our
that's
yeah.
yeah. I
So I
think
mean
that's
that's the genesis of it, and then every person that comes on board, that's one of the things that we basically look out for.
and which is what is that exactly?
Um, it's not just like skill about the job. It's how they think about who is at the other end of this product. Because like we build it, we design it. There are, I mean, obviously other parties in between, but at the end of it, there is an experience to be had by someone, like someone at the other end of the app, or someone at the end of the customer service pipeline. So I mean, we look at how people think about these things, whether they have any customer service experience or like product experience or not, just how people observe these kind of things.
Okay, that's
in
wonderful.
general.
So I want to say one thing that's very interesting for me as a customer is that I noticed Circles.Life actually having a Facebook group for some of its closest customers, and they engage them in their Facebook group. In fact, I'm actually in the Facebook group myself. It's called the Inner Circle, and I believe I showed you this before. I actually
Yes.
won a donut from from being a Circles.Life customer. Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. How has that Facebook group helped your team, your design team in particular, or has it?
Well, it's helped us a lot, especially in the early days of that group, where initially it was okay, let's just see if this is a group that we can get feedback from, or just ask about what they think about our products in general. But then it evolved to be much more than that. Some of these people have helped us in one way or another, either helping moderate the group itself, thinking about at one point we were doing activities for this group
I
earlier
remember.
on. So some members of that group were helping to arrange those for us, and sometimes they also like answer other people's questions. Like newer members of the Facebook group would have like some issues and would like ask as if that was like a customer service channel, and some would be kind enough to answer on our behalf. Even my teammates who are moderating that group are very on the ball, but it's good to see like there are some members in this group who have been in that group and have been customers for almost as long as I have been an employee.
An employee, yeah.
So they're kind of like they grew with us. The group grew with us, and then they have been very valuable sources of feedback from.
Lovely.
Whether informal or, I mean, they're very out. It's a very outspoken group, as you can see, right? Like they would tell us if they feel we're not doing something right for them as customers, or even some small bugs that they see on the app.
Yeah,
they would tell us. They would let us know.
That's really wonderful. I think it was such a great idea. I also remember that your founders are in the Facebook group themselves, so they're in fact listening to what the customers are saying. And I recall, I recall those activities that you had where you were organizing them. Some were done at your offices, and it almost felt like you were building this community together, right? I believe that's moderated by Carrie, and this community helped you a lot in your early days. And I recall at some point in time when you had competitors coming into the market, the group actually became a sounding board. Yeah, the group actually mentioned, hey, you have this competitor, these are their offers, and then like people just started commenting on like their opinions on all this new telcos like TPG.
Yeah.
And all. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
loving the background. Yeah. Yen said, yes. Can anyone guess?
Yes.
Yen, do you know which background is this?
Okay, I'll back away a little bit.
Yeah. It's Avengers, the London HQ.
Yeah, very
Yes.
close. But which Avenger? Which Avenger?
Doctor Strange.
Okay,
Sorry,
Yes.
awesome, awesome.
I'm gonna go on mute. I'm outside.
No problem,
Oh.
no problem. Awesome, awesome. Okay, so that was a bit of a sidetrack. So Albert, you were saying?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's a huge credit to my colleague Carrie, who was really the originator of this group, as she was managing community back then. But then I was also surprised. Earlier we were talking about homework. Like, these people do their homework too. When they, like, some would write super long pieces about either a competitive product that they've seen. And I mean, some of them would actually try it, and then they would sort of review it in a way for us, or whether it's for themselves also, they would use these new products for a while, because a lot of our inner circle members, at least the earlier ones, were just the nature of it. A lot of them are early adopters, so early tech adopters in some way or form. So they would naturally gravitate towards new products in this space, and would be very upfront with what they think about it and how it compares to what we have.
Yeah. Would you recommend this approach for people who are building consumer-facing websites and products? You know, just having a community or a sounding board or a beta test list or something like that.
Yeah, I would definitely would. It's something that you grow over time. I know, like, when we do, sometimes we do guerrilla user research, and we don't have people to talk to. We have to recruit and all.
Oh, so you recruit directly from the group as well?
We do recruit from that group, although obviously we try to expand it just as much as we can, because you want to cater to, like, newer customers as well. Because
and
some of them have
been
super
OGs.
long time customers, and they sort of, like, know more than an average customer. But
So
we do pick up respondents there from time to time. But it's not just like this kind of community where it's a close group of I would say early fans, so to speak. I think there's also value in one thing we're also doing is just reaching out to people who may want to give feedback at some point, maybe not now, but in the futures, because building that pipeline, what we've learned is really important. The best time to build that pipeline is when you don't need it urgently, when you don't need to recruit for user research, or there's no particular product that you're thinking about speaking to them about. But at least what I've seen is when this group also grew together, some of them started, like, hanging out with each other outside of the inner circle among themselves. I mean, we in the end we serve people, right? And people are very social. So it's having, but I think one thing I also learned is we need to be intentional in why we have these groups. I mean, this can go both ways, right? You can have a community, and then if there's no clear reason, there's no clear why. Like, why do you have this community? Is it just like a forum that open-ended, anyone can say anything? It can also go south really quickly if you don't put much thought into it. But in general, community is always great, whether it's an internal community that is has special access to some things, or whether it's a more open community that any customer can join and give feedback as long as they're interested.
That's wonderful, Albert. And before we move on, I would like to welcome those who just joined us. So we have Albert here, who is the head of design and UX at Circles.Life. I'll say one of the rising telcos, and very, very unconventional. So we're learning about customer centricity, this culture, and of course, Albert is going to break into the UX industry. So for those of you who are here, if you find this useful so far, feel free to share the video. We have it on our Facebook page, and tell your friends about it. So Albert, moving on, tell me a little bit about the internal culture, because we had this discussion and earlier, and you mentioned that everyone in the company is responsible for design, right? Everyone can think about design and not just the designers in the company. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, the design team itself, like people who have designer as a title, it's a very small group. So, I read this quote somewhere that design is too important to leave to the designers alone.
Wow. Okay.
I forgot who said that, but
that's okay.
Someone smarter
we'll just
than
credit
me said
you.
that.
We'll just credit you.
No,
Okay. so okay, Albert said someone said that. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So because especially for digital products that a lot of companies build now, I mean, design is super important. It affects everything from the customer using the product to internal systems that support that product. So it's super important that everyone thinks about how the product will work and how the product will be distributed, for example, to really think about the best way to deliver it. So what we have, I mean, obviously we iterated on our processes a lot, but what we have learned is that the earlier you involve other teams, the better it is for the product. Even if it's something that will touch the end customer, our customer service team needs to know that, needs to know what's coming up earlier on, so they can ask their questions and they can anticipate. Let's say even if it's something as small as a promo, like promos we don't think about a lot, but there's there's plenty of thought put into these things, where okay, these are the most common questions we get from customers about any promo you put out, for example. Nice. We would anticipate that and see if can we change the product or the experience of the product fundamentally, that we don't need to answer these questions anymore, or the problem will be solved beforehand.
Yeah.
So that kind of end-to-end thinking helps. So from how do we communicate this to our customers, and how does this actually get executed in our back-end systems? Because all the customers doing is pushing a button or buying an add-on maybe, or subscribing for something, but behind the scenes there are processes in our system that need to work, and telco, it is not a simple technology stack. So it's a whole process from let's say engineers understanding how we want to distribute this or how we want to market this, and at the same time for us like designers or even people in marketing to understand how exactly is this product put together, how does it work, like what, without going in detail to in the tech stack, like how does this actually reach the app, for example, or how does this get shown? So
I'd like to bring an example, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I recall when I converted to Circles.Life from a StarHub, right? I remember the experience was pretty different. Like it almost felt like an Apple-like experience. I was just curious that, were you involved in the process of designing how customers switch from existing telco to the new telco, which is Circles.Life, and like how was your team involved, or like how did the team come up with that process?
Right. So I mean, in the early days, this was something that we kind of learned the hard way. The whole porting process, like changing from one telco to another.
Yeah.
It's something that used to be very manual. Like I did it one time before, even before working at Circles, switching from one telco to another. And back then the process was super manual. At first I could only do it at the shop. Like I had to go there, queue up, and ask the staff there to. I need to terminate the line so I can sign up for
that's
the
right.
one.
It's a lot of human beings involved in the process.
Yeah. But then yes, there are a lot of human beings involved, but for the customer, they just like sit there. Okay, it takes a lot of time because then you need to wait.
Yeah.
But like, okay, if anything goes wrong, it's on them. Right. But when we made it digital, like you as a customer, when you sign up, you don't have to terminate your old line as long as your bills are all settled there. It will automatically happen in the back end. So in theory, that sounds great, right? Because it's almost an invisible process. But then what we've learned is, not a lot of people have done this before.
That's true.
So it's like, people familiar with telco lingo, porting, they know what it is. Some people didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah.
And what we realized is there's so much anxiety behind it because you're doing it yourself. You're pushing the button, you're clicking that, you're choosing that port end option. And if something goes wrong, people feel like they made a mistake, where in fact it could have been an issue on our end. And obviously from the donor telco, like there is a system that exists that has to process that, and that has its limits. Just because it's it's very, from what I understand, it's very old technology. So
how did you guys mitigate that anxiety?
So we learned the hard way. Like we saw all the issues that happened when we first launched. Even during the beta, where we ourselves were trying to port in, and we had all the support behind us because the team was there. If something went wrong with my porting, we just ask somebody. So we went through the process ourselves. So the first 50 people would have been the employees. so we used our own product. We dealt with the issues that came with it even before launch, and we went through that headache. And we thought about, okay, this can't work. A normal person who doesn't work for telco will not go through this trouble to go from point A to point B. I mean, if it comes to just staying with their old telco, just even if it's at a much higher cost, they would do it because this process is really scary, even for us. So that's where it started, and then because it was such a small team back then, it was so easy to like really dig into what was wrong, what could be improved. So that's pretty much how it worked, because it was such a big issue.
So
and it would have been a big blocker to launch if people can't port, because everyone would be porting over, right? Because we had no existing customers.
What I'm hearing from the lesson over here is like your team sort of like did the initial testing themselves. So you kind of ate your own dog food, and and then you experience the problems before you actually launch it out to a wider group of customers. And of course, I'm sure over time, as you learn more from the customers, you also refine the process to what it is today.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Would you consider, like, how is it? How's the process like today? I don't know. I haven't signed up for Circles.Life recently because I've been quite a long time customer.
I mean, today there are a few changes from what you may have seen before. The interesting is, like, even before COVID hit, we were already experimenting with some form of like contactless delivery, although it wasn't called that because that wasn't the point back then. The point was to do offline onboarding. And now like everything is pretty much contactless. When you get the SIM card, you activate it yourself. We've streamlined the process of having someone physically check your IC and look at you personally and validate that it's you who ordered
a card,
the SIM card, because we are required by law to to perform these kind of checks for you just cannot hand out a SIM card to anybody.
And how are you guys doing that?
So a few things.
What's the technology behind it? Yeah.
So there are identity validation.
Hmm.
I mean, digital identity validation tools that are integrated in the purchase flow now, where when you order the SIM, you basically get an unactivated SIM.
Hmm.
So that is okay. Like the courier does not need to personally check
Hmm.
who you are, and if it's really you at the door, look at your IC. They don't have to do that anymore, so they can just leave the package and then you activate it yourself. And it's at that point where we do the ID check through your phone's camera or your computer's
Wow.
camera. I mean, a lot of I've seen a lot of finance apps also start doing this as well.
Lovely.
And there are services that can be integrated that do this. So that's one small thing. It just makes it easier to distribute, and then and it's all on the app, and I think it opens up a lot of possibilities later on.
And more importantly, it's COVID proof. Like you
Yes,
guys
I mean, that
COVID
was the
proofed the
most important
process.
thing.
Yeah, COVID proofed the process before COVID hit.
Yes, we were very fortunate. Like when we received the mandate from IMDA that okay, now this has to be done this way. We were like, okay, we're more than halfway there already, so it wasn't a huge change for us.
Yeah. Okay, so Yen from Standard Chartered's asking, where in the onboarding process do you see most people falling off? I think that's quite an interesting question. Where do you see them struggling and just giving up? Or
I mean, from my own observations, it's usually at the point where there are, I mean, the most things to do. So we used to have in our checkout flow one screen where you fill in everything. This was before contactless, before COVID. So you had to fill in everything, submit your ID, all in one screen. So that is one major drop off, just because maybe people don't have time, or they don't have their IDs with them at that point, or it's not like readily accessible. Just do this later. And I think in every e-commerce transaction there is some drop off at the end, which is like super interesting to me, because some people have gone all this way. I mean, I noticed myself doing this too. Like when I just go like online,
just decided not to buy the item.
Product that looks interesting, like I want this. Yes, put in my address, put in my credit card, and at the end you're like, no,
that's true.
Maybe I don't need this, so let's just keep it there. So I mean, to me, those are the two places that I've really seen, and I think it's quite common.
Yeah, so that's where they kind of struggle. So what did you change? Like, what did you tweak at now? So how's the page different now? Did you get them to fill it up step by step, or?
Yeah, so we did experiment with that kind of flow before as well. But then the whole contactless feature sort of solved some of that.
Okay.
In a way, because it made it easier. So it can kind of hit two birds with one stone there, because it's a much easier process. Then you just have to make sure that once they receive the SIM card, they know it's intuitive to activate it, because that was also something that's not common in Singapore, unless it's a prepaid card.
I think it's really great. I'm really happy to hear like how user experience design played a role in it's traditionally what we call switching costs, right, in business. So switching costs is very high for the customer, and if it's very high, it actually creates a barrier and it's a friction for the customer to switch to your product and service. So I'm glad to hear your breakdown of how you made it simpler on the website e-commerce front, as well as when the customer received the SIM card and making sure it complies with all the regulatory requirements in that sense. So that's wonderful. So I also remember we talked a little bit about this culture and this values of customer centricity in the organization. And you mentioned earlier that you hire for that, right? And I just want to kind of understand, how do you have to evangelize design in Circles.Life, or like when you just explain design to people in the company, like they get it? Yeah, just very curious, like how much explaining do you need to do?
It varies actually. So
Yeah.
I mean, some would be a little bit more receptive to the concepts, just because the way design and design thinking has been presented recently. It could feel very alienating to some who have not done this before, and it feels like it's a magic black box that solves
a lot of
things
problems
for you. But the thing is, with design and design thinking, a lot of the concepts are not exactly new, right? But it's being packaged in a way that is like a more iterative process. But to me, like I think we've talked about this before, I've learned the hard way that evangelizing design on its own doesn't work. I think in the same way with any other process or mindset, whether it's agile design thinking or whatever, that you want to introduce to a company who doesn't officially have that in their process, especially for a startup where you're just trying so hard to launch and get out there that these processes take time to shape up. So what I've learned is the way to really talk to people about design is in the language that each person understands. So if you're communicating it to, let's say, a business leader or someone who's in charge of business, you have to frame it in that way. And if you're talking about design to a developer, it helps if you know as a designer, a little bit about the code that goes into it, so you can talk in their language. So I mean, for me, the way that it's become like an invisible sort of like evangelization in a way. You're not like just, hey, this is the new thing. This is the design process. Either follow it or we're all gonna have a hard time.
I think that's a great strategy.
And obviously with more product oriented people, they would have had some experience with it. And what I'm seeing lately is, I guess it's it has become more of a mainstream thought. I mean, more mainstream than it was, let's say, 5 years ago. So a lot of even new joiners who would join the company are aware of design as a practice, not just as an output. If that makes sense, because traditionally, especially when I was like starting out, design was a deliverable. It was not a way of thinking. Design is something that you produce or something that you create. It's something that you need to deliver at the end of the day. So now I have seen that shift in the last few years when people talk about design, they talk about the process instead of the artifact. And it's really great to see.
Thank you, Sean. Sean said, "I love that quote." Which quote was it?
Which
design
one?
is a deliverable. Sean, you want to unmute yourself and just tell Albert what quote are you talking about? Maybe it's inconvenient. Never mind. Let us know over chat. Anyway, we have Albert.
I'm curious to see what people are quoting me on. So.
We have Albert here from Circles.Life, and we just had a really great conversation about how Circles.Life does its onboarding and creates a customer-centric culture. So, Albert, I think it was a good segue to your own work experience. Yeah, don't worry, Sean. Just let us know what the code is in chat. So, tell me a little bit how you were a developer. I went through your profile. So you're a developer. Okay. So Sean said the quote is, design is a practice, not deliverable. You now own it, Albert. This is like your quote.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that.
I'm curious, like you're a developer. Yeah, you're a developer. Now you're a design leader, right? How did that shift happen? And I think you were very humble when you told me. I think you were joking with me when you said your friends don't think you're a great developer, but I don't know. If you're not a great developer, how did you work as a developer for so long?
Okay, so let me put some context into that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think when we talked previously, I told you that I did not have a formal design education.
Yeah.
I finished a degree in library science. So yeah, there's that. But I first started out when I was, in my final few years in uni, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Then I started learning HTML with a friend.
Yeah.
And then, so that's how it started. And it was in the early days of, the internet. It kind of dates me a little bit. So it was during those times when, everyone just built their own websites on GeoCities or whatever free service that was out there. And for me, it was something new because I can create something out of nothing. And I don't necessarily have to be an artist to do it. Like I always envied my friends who were like the more traditionally creative people. And then, okay, this is something that I can create using all this new technology that I'm learning. So I dove into it and basically learned how to put together a decent-ish website just for myself, for my own learning, my own fun. Built some pretty embarrassing stuff that thankfully is no longer online.
We all have done that. We went through that process. Yeah.
So that was just more for my own learning. And then eventually I discovered like, okay, there are way more tools out there. What is this Photoshop that people keep talking about? So try that out, because you needed icons, you needed visual stuff for your very simple web page, right? You needed graphics, and how do these people do these, like back then it was very skeuomorphic, very 3D-ish graphics.
I remember.
On every website, and I was like, how do they do that? What's this brush steel texture? How does this work? So the start was it came from a very visual standpoint where I want my site to look good, to look the way I want it, and I don't know how to do that, and code does not do all that for me. So that's where I also started learning how to make very basic graphics, buttons, and all that, and somehow convinced somebody to, hire me to do that for a living.
Lovely.
And so that's how it pretty much started, doing like odd freelance jobs here and there right after uni, and used that as a starting point. And eventually, web design sort of matured into some form where, CMSs came out, WordPress primarily.
Content management systems.
Content management systems came out. And then you don't have to code everything manually anymore. So that sort of got me into web development as a profession. Okay. And I think it's just normal to think about, okay, how now I know how to build a website. How do people actually use this? So it's sort of it's the natural next question to anyone who has built any kind of website before, whether it's for fun or for work. You start thinking about, first it was just like, oh, how do I get people to visit my blog? Want to be famous like my blogger friends. How do I do that? But then it's the same, right? When it's a corporate website or a website that sells a product, that's the first thing that you need to think about. How do I tell people about this? So obviously you start learning about things like SEO. Back then you had to list your page on some search engine. It wasn't crawled automatically back then. You had to submit. So it was a very gradual learning of how to build the product, the website, and then how people will use it. So that was like for me, it was an organic transition. I didn't think about that as UX or anything. It's just like, what are the things needed to make this website successful or even functional?
So it sounds like you just wanted to build something, and in the
Yeah,
process of
it's
building
just
something yourself, you just like, oh, I want to figure this out, right? And you
you
just
start
started
asking
building it.
questions like,
Yeah.
like why are people not buying from this site that I built?
So that's
Or why are-
wonderful. I love that curiosity, and I'm also wondering like how much time, because I believe you don't spend this kind of time at work, right? Like how much time were you spending outside of work, like learning all these new things, or spending time doing your own websites?
I mean, in the early days, obviously, when you're much younger, you had more time on your hands. So I was pretty much doing it all the time. Like,
Yeah, whatever work hours.
When I wasn't playing video games, I was doing this.
When you weren't playing video games. Okay,
So
great.
I was rarely seen outside.
Okay. So you were actually really obsessed with your craft.
Yeah, looking back at it, I really was. It's because it was something very novel for me at that time. I always thought I would like. I mean, my dream job was like someday I will like make a video game. But obviously that takes a lot more than just wanting and actually being a proper engineer to build one. And then making websites was something that wasn't as complicated, but still felt like you were building something from scratch.
Lovely.
To me, that was the biggest motivation. Something that I could build.
So you mentioned that a lot of this stuff was self-taught, right? So how I'm curious to know, like, you gave yourselves your own projects and you were learning, I guess, along the way. What were the resources you tapped into? Like, did you read books? Did you attend courses? Or like, I'm just curious, like, how did you manage to pull this off?
Right. So the funny story is like there was this book that my friend had. It was HTML. I forgot what version. So for for those who are just starting out now, back then the HTML book was like this thick.
Okay.
And obviously I didn't read all of it, just the important parts that I needed. So that was first. I was like, this is really hard. Like you're reading a book and then you're typing things on a screen, and if it doesn't work, how do I fix it? Like the book doesn't tell me how to debug things. And back then, when I say back then, this was the early 2000s. So there were not very many resources online. And in the Philippines back then, like internet connectivity was also limited. Like you really had to like plan your online hours to make the most out of it. So
you had constraints.
I had a lot of constraints, and there were basically, I don't know, there were basically two websites that I could find that had tutorials on how to make sites. I think one is still around. It's called Kirupa.com. It's a super old website. It's still around. Yeah. So I mean, people were passionate and kind enough to share their knowledge the way we're doing now on video, but back then they would just write it on their own blogs.
Yeah, that's right.
They didn't even do SEO on their blog. So if you found it, you're very lucky.
Okay. If you found this, you're very lucky.
They're very obscure.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so it was a lot of like searching, and then I was also fortunate enough to have friends who were also interested in the same thing I was.
Yeah.
So we would just like when we would meet, like, oh, check out this like fan page that I made, and then we would enter like web design contests in school. I lost every contest that I joined, but it was fun.
Okay,
so
and
just
it was
how
practice.
Other people do it.
It was practice
seeing
for you as
people
well.
who were way better than you do it, and you just be like, wow, how did they do that? And then you feel like, okay, I thought I knew it. I knew things. No, I don't. Now
so
I have to go back and learn how to do these things.
I think at some point in your career, you got pretty good at it, and therefore you came to Singapore and you were hired. All right. And I recall like before you joined, last position was the UX lead for TradeHero, which is a tech startup. So, you know, like going from a designer to a design manager, you know, how did you kind of like up your game? How did you learn then?
Yeah, so this one is really something that you learn on the job. Well, of course, it's great if when you have support from your own managers or your own team or more senior than you to sort of help you out. But it's something that I learned on the job. Really, I mean, I didn't feel I was prepared for it.
Okay.
I don't think, but it just so happened that, you know, when I joined the team, obviously you couldn't do everything by yourself, in which what I was doing previously at a much smaller startup. And then now, okay, as the team grows, you have to grow your team. And it's not just managing your team, like people who report to you directly. What I've learned about management is managing other people around you, not managing them in their jobs, but managing their expectations.
Lovely.
So, so it's a in a way it's a management per se. It's like a 360 kind of thing. Obviously, mentoring is something that I discovered that I had to do for my team to really level up, and something that I'm still trying to get better at.
Got it.
So, I mean, to your question, like what was that transition? Like it's a much harder transition than coming from like development into design. That was more a natural evolution. But this leading and managing a team, it is very challenging.
Okay. And yeah, managing people is definitely very, very tough. And I'm curious, since many of the people who are tuning in, by the way, this is Albert from Circles.Life, the design lead of Circles.Life, one of the regional telcos. So definitely it's a challenge to manage people. And I'm wondering, you know, as a hiring manager, what kind of characteristics do you look out for when you're hiring designers in your team?
Yeah. So to me, the actual design skills, when we say design skills, it's the production skills, the deliverables, basically. Like the part where can this person deliver, the deliverable is not the top thing anymore. It's right now I'm really looking at you know, how curious this person is. I mean, I interview a lot of like younger designers or even people who are just trying to
break
get
into the
design, or
Yeah.
just maybe just go on an internship and see if design is for them. So the determining all other things equal, the determining factor would be how curious is this person? How do they think about the world in general? And how do they express those thoughts? Because the skills themselves can be taught, can be learned, and the tools change all the time, but you have to relearn it anyway, no matter how experienced you are.
Yeah.
So, and the methods keep changing. So it's that curiosity and I guess adaptability and their reason for going into design or wanting to go into design, not just because they think it's, you know, I think it's cool or all their friends are doing it, it's popular. Yeah.
So
I try to dig into their motivations of wanting to be a designer more than their actual skills.
Could you pretend that, let's say I'm a candidate, you know, what are some of the top 2 questions that you ask me to kind of determine that?
Yeah. So there is this question that I used to ask, like, tell me about a product, or it could be an app or physical product, whatever, that you've used recently that you felt was really, really well made, and why. So so I mean, you can answer that. If you
Okay,
like.
I won't answer that, but
Just
this is for reference for those who
Yeah.
are going to. That's quite a common question. In the past, when I went to design interviews as well, that's one of the things I got. Okay, that's one great question. So if anyone has questions for Albert, please type in chat or just kind of ping me and let me know. We have a couple of people tuning in from Facebook Live as well, so thank you for tuning in. Perhaps I'll just kind of ask, Albert, if there is any parting advice or to your younger self or to younger designers over here, right, or designers who are trying to break into the industry, what kind of advice will you give them?
Wow. Okay. So I think I would answer it in the frame of like the second question, where what advice I would give to younger designers now, because the younger me had very different
contexts
situations
and
different contexts that might not be applicable. So I think so for anyone who I mean, if you're young and you're just starting out as a designer, obviously think of why is this attractive to you? What is your idea of a great designer at this point? It would be different at different stages in your career, but so that's one. And if you're someone who's going into design from another field, you might be like experienced at some other field and want to move into UX design. My advice would be, think about how your current career or your previous career would give you an advantage, because design it affects everything, and in the same way, everything can influence how you will become as a designer. So because in the end there are three things that designers need to be well versed in, let's say, and none of them is design.
Okay.
I mean, obviously that's the base.
Again?
I mean, that's the baseline, but
okay,
three things that would really elevate someone are, and obviously technology. Most of what we do depends on one form of technology or another. We can't escape it. So you have to be passionate about technology, whether it's existing tech or things that might exist in the future that people are just dreaming about now. Second is business. You need to understand how businesses work. In general, not just the one that you're in or you want to get into. And obviously, people. You need to really be interested in people in general, and observe why people behave the way they do. I think COVID-19 gave us a really good UX design experience for everybody. Like, how do you arrange your house?
How do we redesign?
How do we redesign our lives so it's not as terrible as it is? And the lives of like other people around us, who some of them depend on us, right? So
exactly.
So it's those three things are, to me, those are the three things that at least I myself am trying to learn on top of the
technical skills,
the basic design frameworks.
Cool. Albert, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. So if you are tuning in, please comment. If you're on Facebook, please comment and let us know what you have learned from the video. If you're over here in chat, I'll be very curious to know what was your takeaway and how do you feel about the session thus far. So please feel free to do that. I'm going to take a few minutes to share about our upcoming events. So Albert, just feel free to hang around for a couple of minutes. Sure. Yeah. All right. So the reason why we're doing this is because COVID has disrupted many design events, and therefore I found as an entrepreneur, right, and as an educator, there was a lack of events for people to learn about user experience design, right? And as a result, I decided to create this webinar series sometime in mid-May, and we've been going on it for every week, just as a means to share. And I happen to also speak with design leaders like Albert quite regularly through my outreach activities, because we do training for corporates. So therefore we and I also coach clients as well. So I like to stay close to the industry and kind of understand what's going on. So if you are getting value from participating in the session today, feel free to share what you learned and tag us with the hashtag leaning into change. And I will send you a career guide and portfolio building tips, especially for those who are breaking into the industry. And this includes common questions that people ask during interviews, and who is hiring and how much should you be expecting as a salary. So that's one thing. Another thing that I've been doing ever since mid-May is that I've been conducting weekly intro to UX workshops. These are workshops I used to conduct for General Assembly. And we actually conduct them for free, although I encourage people to just donate the amount to charity. They used to be, some of these sessions used to be paid as well. So there's one upcoming on Monday. You're welcome to participate if you're interested to dive deeper into the topic. I think what Albert said today is that design is a practice, right? So, and I truly believe as an educator that you know, even in the way that I deliver and teach, it's also a practice, right? Making sure that people are able to practice that. And next Wednesday, just a heads up, next Wednesday, we have the head of design for AirAsia, Nathan, who's going to come and it's going to spend about an hour with us, kind of just sharing AirAsia's approach to design. I think that could be quite interesting. And at the same time, if there is a interest in some of you who are mid-career professionals, or you're looking to break into the UX design industry, I happen to run a coaching program for a small group of people. We already have our first batch, and we're kind of looking out. If you like to find out more about the program, feel free to reach out to me and ask me questions about it. Right, this is a paid program. Okay, so if you're not on the list and you're tuning in from Facebook, please get on the list by going to CuriousCore.com and signing up for the newsletter. All right, I'll love to see. Okay, so for those of you who are in the Zoom webinar session, do you mind just like typing, you know, what's your one key takeaway, and what, you know, how was the session for you thus far? Let's just take a couple minutes to do that. Albert, was there anything else you wanted to cover, or, you know, while people are typing in chat? I need you to unmute. Oh dear, let me, yeah, sorry. Yeah, go on.
No, that was me. No, I think I'd just like to, I mean, first, thank you for inviting me to share
Lovely.
this event. I think what you're doing is really great, especially now that, you know, a lot more people are really interested in our field than before. And the way that you're doing it now, especially in COVID times, it's a really great way of reaching out, honestly.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for coming and sharing. Jesse, thank you for leaving a comment. Love to hear your origin story and great advice you gave for new designers as well. Paula joined late, but insights were very useful, especially 3 things you looked out for when hiring for designers. Thank you, Paula, for dialing in. Anyone else would like to leave? And for those of you who are here, feel free to reach out. And if you think like anyone should sign up or anyone should be in the list, feel free to pass this link, sign up link to them. I'll as we're hearing from a couple more people. Lovely. So just to get a sense, well, Sean said, inspirational. Shratna said, your journey is inspirational. Thanks for sharing. Albert said, thank you for sharing your personal experience, structure of the companies, and glimpse into your hiring question. Chip said, thanks for sharing. Thank you everyone for attending. Any last words, Albert, before we end the live stream? Oh, hey, hang on, you're on mute again. That's the thing about Zoom.
Every time.
Every time. All right. Anyway.
No, I was just saying thank you to everyone who tuned in. Hope it was helpful in some way or form to everyone.
And can they reach out to you on LinkedIn? Can people find you on LinkedIn? Are they allowed to?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. So please reach out to Albert Camacho, Camacho. Yes, it's been a pleasure serving all of you, and I'll see you all next week for Nathan's webinar, or on Monday if you're coming for the Intro to UX workshop. Okay, so I'll wave you all off. Thank you so much for attending. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jesse, for the clap emoticon. Lovely. So let me stop